Well, imagine being a slave to the partner or relative who pays your bills, trapped and prevented from gaining your financial independence. Our financial expert, Juliette Fairley, is here to share some insight on what experts call financial abuse.
Yes.
Wow. How does that happen?
Well, it happens because you're too enmeshed with your partner. So one of the things that you want to do is make sure that you have your own bank account and that you're not too dependent or enmeshed with your partner. So that you have a joint account, but then you each have your own separate accounts, because it's so easy for both of you to become dependent on one another financially.
Sure.
So,
now, in yesteryear, it was the housewife and the younger women, because they're dependent on the guy who makes most of the money. But that's not the case as much in this generation. More of it is now with senior citizens?
Yes, $3 billion of money was lost to elder abuse, financial abuse for the elderly. So it affects the people who are less likely to be able to care for themselves.
Sure. Now, how do you, I mean, I guess it's really hard when you're a senior citizen and maybe it's a relative who's taking advantage of you. How do you, how do you keep an eye on these things so that that doesn't happen?
Definitely. Well, it's usually a relative or a loved one or a spouse who does the taking advantage of. And if you're getting up in years, you want to be sure that you identify more than one caretaker who's going to be in charge of your finances. As you become less and less able to take care of yourself, you want to have more than one person so that there is a collective eye on your finances rather than just one person.
That makes sense. How do you do that? Do you start that at a younger age and say, okay, well, who do I look at now?
Right.
So that 10 years from now, I'm covered.
Well, you want to look at your children. Who is the most financially responsible child? You want to look at your spouse. You want to look at your extended family. Who are the people that you trusted the most when you were active and that you think you can trust as you age? People reveal themselves all throughout your life. So it's no surprise if somebody turns out to be very controlling around the money, which is one of the symptoms of being financially abused, is if you feel that you don't have access to your money, or your spouse is nickeling and diming you, they're demanding receipts, and that you don't have any money and they have control. And it happens very slowly and it kind of creeps up on you.
Sure.
So it's very important to have some money set aside for yourself and not turn over everything to the joint finance.
Right. Now, it's important, I would imagine, to keep records then of your monthly expenditures and things that you can keep records of even if the other person is doing the spending.
Absolutely. And if you're preparing to take flight, then you want to make sure you have certain paperwork with you. I mean, some people run out of the house and they never turn back and they never go back and they say, God, I sure wish I'd taken my birth certificate. I sure wish I would have taken the credit card statements. I sure wish I would have taken the bank statements. So you want to make sure that you are keeping track and that you have your copies. Maybe you keep them at your office, or you keep them in your car, so that if anything happens, you have your documentation of all of your finances together.
So this is something, when you talk about these efforts, this is perhaps more geared toward the younger woman or the housewife, someone who has maybe a wherewithal to escape, as opposed to a senior citizen who may be physically unable to just go.
Exactly. And that's why it's very important that as we age, collectively, that we identify people that we can trust for the elder, so that when you become a senior citizen, you have more than one person, that you don't give the power of attorney over to one person, you put it over to a collective group. So yes, but definitely the women, the younger women and the housewives can actually get a job and can actually take flight.
You mentioned something very interesting, power of attorney. You can split that among people so that one person doesn't have total control?
Well, it depends on your state, on the state that you live in, but it is possible, and it's very important if you're going to do that, that you set it up with your probate attorney. And so it is possible to have a backup and to have a joint power of attorney.
What do you look for in terms of avoiding being a victim? What do you look for in financial abuse?
Well, if you want to avoid it, or prevent it, is you want to always have your own bank account for yourself that your spouse may or may not know about, in addition to your joint account. You also want to have a separate credit card account, and ideally you would have, if you have a bank account and a credit card jointly with your spouse or a partner, make sure that either one of you can come in and shut it down at any moment. Because there are some cases where you realize you're being financially abused and you cannot shut it down because you need the permission of the other party. So you want to find a bank, shop around and find a bank and find a credit card company that will allow one person to shut it down if they want to.
Is it hard to prosecute the other person if you find out something is amiss?
Well, if you have a joint bank account with a person or a joint credit card, then you are jointly responsible for the debts that are incurred. So even if the other person incurred all the debt, if they can't find that person, they'll come after you. So you are jointly responsible. So it's very important to be careful. I would even go so far as to say don't have a joint account, but that can be, you know, you're in the romantic phase of the relationship.
Sure.
It's hard not to. So I would definitely talk to the bank people, talk to the credit card people about what happens if one of us wants to shut it down, so that you are able to shut it down. Otherwise, they could disappear and take your credit with you.
Wow. All right. Well, good advice. Thanks, Juliette Fairley. Always a pleasure.